My friends, let's talk about what really happens when he reaches out after no contact. You've been doing the work, you've taken a step back, recentered yourself, found your power again, and then ding, a message appears. It's vague, it's friendly, it's seemingly innocent. But make no mistake, when a man reaches out after a period of no contact, it's easy to assume that he's acting out of emotion. Maybe he misses you, maybe he's had a realization, maybe he wants to reconnect. While those things can be true, what often goes unnoticed is that his action isn't just emotionally driven, it's strategic. His message, his call, that random meme he sends at 11:43 p.m. isn't just casual, it's a test. And more importantly, it's not necessarily immature. In fact, it can be quite calculated. It's about regaining a sense of control, about seeing whether the dynamic has shifted or if he still holds influence over your emotional world. Think of it like this. No contact creates a vacuum. You've removed your energy, your attention, your validation, things he may have taken for granted. When you pull away, especially if it's after a situation where he assumed you'd always be available, that silence can feel like a threat to his ego. For someone used to emotional access, that cutoff creates uncertainty. People hate uncertainty, especially when they're used to feeling in control. Instead of openly confronting their emotions or acknowledging the space you've created, many men opt for a safer path, a test, a let me just see where she's at moment. He might do this in subtle ways, a casual message, liking an old photo, reacting to a story, or even asking a mutual friend how you're doing. These aren't necessarily direct attempts at rekindling a relationship, they're probes. They're designed to measure your emotional temperature without putting him at risk of rejection. This kind of behavior isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's driven by confusion. He may genuinely feel conflicted. On one hand, he doesn't want to feel the discomfort of your absence. On the other, he may not be ready or willing to do the work a real reconnection requires. So instead, he sends out signals to see if you're still emotionally tethered to him. And here's where the strategy becomes clear. By testing you, he gets information without giving anything. If you respond quickly, warmly, or emotionally, he receives confirmation that he still has a certain amount of pull in your world. If you ignore him or respond with indifference, he learns that things have shifted and that his place in your life may no longer be secure. This is why understanding the psychology behind the test is so important. It protects you from reacting impulsively. When you see his message not as a heartfelt olive branch, but as a way to check your emotional availability, you respond with more awareness. You're able to pause, observe, and ask yourself, does this message align with someone who's grown, or is it just a temperature check? The test isn't always a conscious manipulation, it's often just an instinctive move. People seek comfort, and he may be seeking comfort in what used to be familiar, your attention, your warmth, your presence. But emotional comfort isn't the same as emotional commitment. And that's the line you have to draw. Just because he's testing the waters doesn't mean you need to swim out to meet him. The power is in recognizing the test for what it is and in responding, not from old patterns of hope or attachment, but from a new foundation of self-respect. Because when you stop seeing his outreach as a sign of change and start seeing it as a reflection of uncertainty, you stop giving it more weight than it deserves. And from that place, you regain control, not over him, but over your own emotional clarity. When a man reaches out after a period of no contact, it's important to look beyond the surface. His message might sound friendly, nostalgic, or even flirty, but beneath that, there's often something more layered going on. Most of the time, his outreach isn't purely about missing you or wanting to reconcile. It's a way of checking in, but not necessarily in the wholesome, how are you really doing kind of way. More often, it's about satisfying a question in his mind. Do I still have access to her? This isn't always about feelings, it's about control, or at the very least, about satisfying curiosity that's been eating at him in your absence. But there are two major forces at play when someone reappears after a silence: control and curiosity. Curiosity by itself is harmless. We're all curious by nature. We wonder how people are doing, what they're up to, if they still think about us. When someone you've been close to disappears from your life, it's human to feel the pull of the unknown. But when curiosity is mixed with a need for validation or ego reinforcement, it transforms into something more manipulative. That's where control starts to slip in. A man will reach out just to see if he still has the same effect on you. Can he still make you smile? Will you still drop everything to reply? Are you still emotionally open to him, even after distance and silence? These questions aren't about reconnecting. They're about re-establishing dominance over the emotional dynamic. They're about control. And this control isn't always overt or aggressive. It can come disguised as a sweet message, a memory he brings up out of the blue, or a comment on something specific he knows will pull your heart. It's tailored, intentional, and often very subtle. He's not showing up with flowers and a deep apology. He's showing up with just enough to stir your emotions and observe the result. This is why it's critical not to take every post, no combat message at face value. You have to look at the intent, not just the content. If someone is truly interested in rebuilding something real, they'll show consistency, accountability, and growth. They won't just dip in and out, testing your emotional waters like someone checking the temperature of a pool. That behavior is driven by ego, not by love. A man who's operating from curiosity wants answers. He wants to know what you're thinking, who you're seeing, how much of you still belongs to him emotionally. But a man operating from control wants more than answers. He wants reassurance that he can still affect your emotions without doing the work to deserve that place again. He wants to know you haven't outgrown him, that you haven't healed beyond needing him. And here's the thing, it's very possible to mistake these tests for romantic interest because they feel like attention, and attention can be intoxicating, especially if you've been missing that connection. But real interest is backed by effort. Real interest leads somewhere. Tests just loop you back into the same old pattern. You have to know the difference, because the moment you confuse control or curiosity for care, you fall right back into a dynamic that doesn't serve your growth. The key is emotional awareness, to recognize when someone is reaching out to truly connect versus when they're reaching out to feel powerful again. Your strength lies in seeing the difference and choosing accordingly. When someone who once held a place in your life starts sending little messages after a period of no contact, messages that are vague, light, and low effort, it's easy to interpret them as a sign that he's been thinking about you, maybe even that he wants to fix things. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. Those little texts, the "hey, you crossed my mind," or just checking in, they're not signs of emotional growth. They're not evidence of change. Most of the time, they're breadcrumbs. So the next time you receive a message that's vague, half-hearted, or emotionally empty, pause. Ask yourself, what is this really? Does this message show growth? Does it show that he understands what went wrong? Is there any sign of effort behind it? Or is it just a spark meant to reignite your interest while he stays comfortably distant? You are not someone who should be fed in fragments. You're not a second thought, a backup plan, or an option. When someone comes back, they need to come back with something real. Anything less is just a distraction dressed as a sign. And once you see it clearly, you stop chasing crumbs and start holding out for the whole damn meal. Emotional consistency is one of the most powerful forms of self-respect you can cultivate, especially after no contact. When someone tests you after a period of silence, it's not your words they're really paying attention to, it's your emotional response. Are you flustered? Are you eager? Do you revert to old patterns, or do you stay rooted in the growth and clarity you've built during your time apart? This is where emotional consistency becomes everything. It means you don't waver just because someone reappears. You don't get thrown off your center just because a message pops up that 6 months ago would have made your heart race. You've already done the inner work. You've taken a step back to reclaim your emotional space, to realign with your standards. When that person shows up again, their presence shouldn't undo the progress you've made. This is often the moment where the real test begins, not for them, but for you. It's easy to feel strong when there's no contact, no triggers, no reminders. But when that trigger lands right in your inbox with a familiar name and a hint of nostalgia, that's when your consistency is tested. Do you slip into your old emotional habits? Do you look for meaning in their vague words? Do you soften your boundaries because you miss the connection? Staying emotionally consistent doesn't mean being cold. It doesn't mean ignoring someone just to prove a point. It means choosing your responses with intention, not emotion. It means asking yourself, what is the energy I want to maintain in my life right now? And then choosing behaviors that protect that energy, regardless of who's trying to pull you off course. The person reaching out may not even realize they're testing you. Sometimes it's unconscious, they're just following a feeling. But whether or not it's intentional, your response is what teaches them how to engage with you moving forward. If you rush to reply with warmth and vulnerability to a message that required no courage on their part, you signal that the dynamic hasn't changed. You show that your boundaries were temporary, that your silence was just a tactic, not a transformation. That's the power of emotional consistency. It communicates everything without saying much. It shows maturity, it shows self-worth, and it draws a clear line between who you were when the relationship was ending and who you are now. So when the test comes, and it likely will, remember that your value doesn't lie in how fast you respond or how generous you are with your emotions. It lies in how aligned you are with your own growth. Emotional discipline isn't about shutting down your feelings. It's about not letting those feelings make decisions for you anymore. You've already done the hard part, creating distance, healing, finding yourself again. Now your job is to protect that progress, not because you're closed off, but because you finally know what's worth opening up for. And anything that threatens that clarity, it's not worth your peace. When someone comes back after no contact, they aren't just listening to your words, they're reading your energy. They're observing how you carry yourself, how you respond, how much space you allow them to take up. And here's the truth that often gets missed. Your reaction, not your message, reveals everything. He's not only looking at what you say, he's paying attention to the emotion behind it. Do you seem eager, guarded, indifferent, calm? He's watching for cues to understand whether he still affects you, whether you've moved on, or whether you're still emotionally accessible. This is why it's not about crafting the perfect message or trying to say all the right things. It's about the place you're responding from. Because you can say, I'm good, in a way that screams you're still hoping for something more. You can reply with, hope you're well, but lace it with the energy of confusion, hurt, or longing. Your energy speaks volumes, and it always arrives before your words. He may not even realize consciously that he's scanning for this, but on a deeper level, that's exactly what's happening. Is your tone relaxed, or does it carry an undertone of frustration or desire? Does your response feel detached in a healthy way, or emotionally charged in a way that tells him he still has space in your heart? This moment becomes a mirror. The way you show up reflects back the emotional progress you've made or haven't made. If your energy communicates desperation or even subtle emotional reactivity, it can undo the work you did during your silence. Not because you're weak or wrong to feel. Feelings are human, but because you're letting someone else's test dictate your emotional state. Is what makes this tricky. He might not come in with drama or intensity. In fact, the more casual the message, the more potent the test. Hey stranger, just saw something that reminded me of you. How have you been? These types of messages are emotionally low risk for him because they trigger a wave of old memories, feelings, and possibly hope. And if you respond with your old emotional patterns, he picks up on that instantly. Even if your words sound neutral, breadcrumbing is when someone gives you just enough attention to keep you emotionally hooked without ever offering anything meaningful or consistent. It's not love. It's not intention. It's an ego stroke, a control mechanism, or sometimes just boredom dressed up as effort. And when it happens after no contact, it's usually not a coincidence. It's a deliberate attempt to see if you're still available, emotionally, mentally, or even physically, without putting in the work that real connection requires. These small efforts aren't random. They are calculated enough to stir something in you. Nostalgia, hope, a sense of longing. And if you're not grounded in your own clarity, it can be incredibly easy to slip into believing that these crumbs are the beginning of something new, when in reality, they're just leftovers from something old. It's the equivalent of someone tossing out a line to see if the fish will still bite, not because they're ready to reel it in and care for it, but simply to check if it's still there. And the danger of responding to breadcrumbs is that they can create a loop. Every time you respond to a message that comes without depth, without purpose, without change behind it, you reinforce that low effort is enough to access you. You unintentionally send the message that he doesn't need to do better. Because even his smallest gestures earn your attention. Over time, this can trap you in a cycle of minimal contact, occasional highs, and emotional confusion. This is why it's so important to respond from a grounded place, not performative detachment, not fake indifference, but real self-possession that comes from genuinely doing the inner work, from healing, from detaching with grace, not resentment. When your energy says, I'm at peace, I'm not waiting for anything from you, that registers loud and clear, and it changes the dynamic entirely. It also sets the tone for how future interactions will go. If he senses that you're no longer emotionally entangled, he's faced with a decision, step up or step back. But if he fences you're still emotionally tied to him, even if you're trying to hide it, he may take that as permission to keep engaging with you on his terms, not yours. So when you get that message, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what is my energy saying right now? Do I feel clear? Am I responding because I want to or because I need something from him emotionally? Am I in control of this moment or is it controlling me? Your reaction is your power. It tells the real story, and when your energy is aligned with self-worth, peace, and emotional clarity, it's impossible to misread. You don't need the perfect reply. You just need to stay rooted in the version of you that no longer gives away power in exchange for attention. There's a moment that comes after no contact, sometimes weeks later, sometimes months, when he suddenly reaches out. And in that moment, you might find yourself asking, does this mean he wants me back? Is this real? Has he changed? But the real question you should be asking is, what version of me is he reaching out to? Because often, he's not reaching out to the woman you've become. He's reaching out to the version of you he remembers. The version who gave and forgave too quickly. The version who waited for his texts, made excuses for his distance, and accepted crumbs instead of real commitment. When someone reappears after disappearing, it's not always because they've grown. Many times they come back expecting to find things exactly as they left them. They're hoping that the emotional axis they once had is still there, that they can slide back into your life without having to earn a place in it. It's less about who you are now and more about what they assume hasn't changed. That's why how you respond is so crucial. If you've grown, if you've redefined your standards, healed your patterns, and elevated your self-respect, then your energy will reflect that. But if you respond from the place you were in before, from the version of you who tolerated inconsistency, overlooked red flags, and prioritized his comfort over your peace, then that's the version he'll keep talking to. That's the version he's hoping still exists. There's a moment that comes after no contact, sometimes weeks later, sometimes months, when he suddenly reaches out. And in that moment, you might find yourself asking, does this mean he wants me back?